Welcome to Contracting Conversations. My name is Scott Williams and I'm joined by my co-host Jim Valley. Before we get started today, I'd like to remind you that Contracting Conversations can be found on DAU Media, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and Jim and I would be thrilled if you were able to subscribe. And please, if you like the content, hit that like button at the end. It really does us a lot of benefit and helps us with all our statistics to keep this type of podcast going for you. So please hit that like button and we really appreciate it. Today we have the pleasure of talking with George Ilse. He's DAU's lead for Contract Administration Credential. It's actually the Contract Administration Special Topics Credential. And we're really pleased to have George with us today to talk about it. So George, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me on the show today.
Oh, absolutely. We're really happy to have you. To get us started with the podcast, can you tell us a little bit about what the Contract Administration Credential is all about?
Yes, the Contract Administration Credential is to help the 1102 population with contract administration. I guess that would kind of go in the title. And as we all know, contract administration covers a multitude of actions after contract award, from payment to oversight, financing, unique government rights like termination for convenience, even things like suspension and debarment, and the whole legal and regulatory framework that underpins these actions. Some learners out there might work for the Defense Contract Management Agency and spend a career in post-war to contract administration like I did. Others might work from contract award to contract closeout, while others might have a hybrid situation where a contract administration office like DCMA administers some but not all of their contracts. This credential provides an introduction to the world of contract administration, and by taking the 6 courses that comprise it, plus an introductory video and final assessment, students will be able to understand and perform many functions.
All right, thanks, George. I tell you, contract administration is so critical to contracting, and I'm so excited that we have this credential, CCON 013, that people go to. So you mentioned the 6 courses. What exactly is the structure of this credential?
Thanks, Jim. So the 6 courses plus the intro video and final assessment sounds like a lot of courses. But they're all online and they're all self-paced, and one of them actually is a common course for some other credentials as well. So there's a chance that you might have completed it for one of the other credentials that you've taken. One thing that I'm really excited about this credential is that it's getting to showcase DAU's College of Contract Management, CCM, courses for contract administration. So even though CCM was stood up to serve the Defense Contract Management Agency community, many of the core concepts from CCM's contracting, air operations, quality, and engineering courses are applicable to all DoD and many civilian agencies. After all, the Federal Acquisition Regulation and the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement guides our actions under the basis for our contracts. So we recommend that students start with the introductory video, which will give a layout of the credential. Then we recommend that they take CMC 1000, which gives an introduction to DCMA contract administration and some basic contract administration principles. Even if you don't work for DCMA, you might need to reach out to an administrative contracting officer for indirect cost rates or business system statuses. Next, we recommend students take legal considerations in contracting, CON 216, which is a foundational course. And though we are using this class for contract administration, it covers content across the entire contract lifecycle. We next suggest learners take CMC 1500, which is Introduction to Terminations. And this might seem an odd choice. After all, we might assume that the termination contracting officer will handle our termination for convenience actions. But we must back up first and realize that a T4C is a unique government right, and the contracting officer should carefully consider using that right. Upon termination, many things will need to be sorted and questions of equity settled. This process is a team activity and is comprised of the procuring contracting officer, administrative contracting officer, plan clearance officer, the TCO, and other functional specialists. Next, there's CLC 106, contracting officer representatives with a mission focus. Cores many times are the eyes and ears of the contracting officer. Understanding their roles, responsibilities, and most importantly, limitations are critical to successful contract administration. Contracting officers must document contractor performance, and that is where CLC 28, past performance information, comes into the mix. We next recommend CLC 065, which covers suspension and debarment. Again, this is different from private sector contracting. Finally, there's the capstone assessment, which is an exam.
Wow. Hey, thanks, George. I tell you, this credential really does seem pretty robust.
It is. And when we were putting it together, there's so many topics that we were trying to sort out, how do we cover? And I really think about this as an introduction to contract administration. There are so many areas that this credential touches on that other DAU products can go into much greater depth. But the student who gets through these 6 courses and completes the assessment will be able to perform many basic contract administration functions.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, George.
Yeah, absolutely, George. I mean, there's a lot going on here in this credential, a lot to offer. And I think a lot of people can benefit from it. But who do we see as our target audience for this particular credential?
Thank you. So, as contract administration is an activity that most 1102s will engage in, I hate to say the old answer, it's for everyone, but it is going to be something that most of the contracting community engages in. So even if DCMA or another CAO handles your contract administration office, handles your contract administration, decisions like termination still need to be made by the PCO. And I would almost say outside the 1102 community, a lot of this information is good information for other functional areas that need to engage with contracting, understanding why your administrative contracting officer might be pushing back on something, or why a contracting specialist is asking for something, or why the TCO is asking a certain question. So I would say that though this is for 1102s and applicable to most 1102s, the broader acquisition community could still find value in understanding contract administration.
Yeah, I agree, George. I think, like I said, there's a lot of good value here, and I appreciate it. And just for the folks listening, as an added note, you may find a class included in the credential that's really a benefit to you or your acquisition team, and you could recommend that. They don't have to earn the credential if they don't see that as a benefit, but they can go in there and take these individual courses as well to get up to speed on a particular topic, because there's a lot of good information here. And for the rest of you, it'd be an excellent credential for you to achieve, because you'll learn a heck of a lot about contract administration in the credential that George has got set up. So yeah, it looks good, George. Thanks.
Hey, before we let you go, George, I think it's very important just to make sure we reiterate out there how long this credential is good for. So once you get it, how many years before you have to renew it?
Great question. So the credential lasts 5 years.
Okay, so it lasts 5 years, and then after that, at some point, there's going to be some type of renewal process. We just don't know at this point what that's going to entail. I'm guessing it's going to depend on what new policies or new things that really people need to know in order to be caught up to date, right?
Yes, and I think one of the things too is contract administration does change a bit with every National Defense Authorization Act or other act of Congress. We have new laws that we have to follow, which promulgates new regulations. There's continuous court decisions or Armed Services Board of Contract Appeal decisions that impact contract administration. And all of that is driving the courses that are underlying this credential. So if you took the credential once and never took it again, you might be missing out on some of those changes. And so having the 5-year window and then having to come back and do maybe a reassessment or taking a new class that's part of the credential kind of reflects the evolution of contract administration. I have to say right now, contract financing is a really hot part of contract admin. Defense pricing and contracting just released a very large study looking at progress payments. It's one of the biggest studies on progress payments since the 1980s. And I wouldn't be surprised if the FAR, DFARs are changed based upon the study. So we wouldn't want people just to have the same information that they had in the past.
Yeah, I think that's very important for people to understand that, FAR, DFARs, regulations seem to change all the time, and we will find a way to bring you up to date without you necessarily having to take, the whole credential over again. You just take a update, basically, course. We'll see what happens. So, hey, George, thank you so much for coming on the show to discuss CCON 013, the Contract Administration Special Topics Credential.
Thank you so much.
All right. So for all those out there, we just want to make sure we reiterate what Scott said in the beginning. The podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, DAU Media, and YouTube. And so we have links below. We also have links below to the credential. So you can just click on those links in the description, and it'll take you right to this credential. So take a look at it and see if it is the right thing for you. So thank you for listening to us today, and we look forward to having future contracting conversations with you.